Scrubs is such a good show.
It is such a good show. It's such a good show. Yes. Well, welcome to the Cut for Time podcast here at the Canton United Methodist Church. My name is Pastor Clay. I'm joined by Eric Stearns, and we're on Zoom tonight because the weather is nuts. It is raining and cold and gross, and so just to keep Eric off of icy roads heading into town, we met over Zoom today to talk about my sermon from Sunday, which was also a little bit crazy because church was nuts. We had our wonderful Advent day of all kinds of special music, and so we heard from a lot of the Carpenter family and Eric and Jenna and the CUMC choir, and I sang a song, and it was a great, great day. Then I recorded a version of the sermon that went a little bit longer and posted that to our Facebook and YouTube and posted the audio to the podcast. And so Eric and I are going to dig into that message, dig into some of the things that were different between church and the video recording, and then just also explore the times in our lives when we've been made to feel welcome and included in something and the way that that has made an impact on us. And the way that through that we make an impact on others by bringing that sense of joy and contentment wherever we go. And hopefully you do too. So let's get into it.
One thing that I was thinking about, also a deep question. So the shepherds tell everyone, right? Mm-hmm. We find out in Luke. Why don't we know anything about Jesus till he's 30, essentially? I mean, we know something about him when he's like 12 or preteen or whatever.
Yep.
Like if they know everyone and everyone, I mean, if they're telling everyone, and so we know about this person, why don't we really know anything? Because we can't, the wise man story, which we could talk about how that's not actually when he's a baby.
Right. Yeah. Yep. And like, we'll get there. Epiphany's coming.
Sure. But like, okay, so he's probably 2 at that time or 4, toddler to kid.
Yep.
But then he's, preteen, and then he's 30. So we know him to be who he is this whole time. Why don't we ever talk about him in between?
Sure.
You know that answer?
That's part of like just the way that the Gospels are written. That's the biggest answer is that we just don't have those stories from the Gospels. And like what to really get into that is I would jump to the Gospel of John. In John chapter 2, Jesus is at the wedding of Cana, and they run out of wine. It's the whole miracle story. They run out of wine, and they're just like, "Oh, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?" Like this is it's this huge social faux pas and a huge problem for the host. And it could be that host was a part of Mary's family. Because Mary's the one that goes and fixes it. Like Mary jumps into stereotypical Jewish mom mode and says, "Hey, Jesus, I know that you can do something about this." And so I envision Mary pulling Jesus by the arm, or maybe even pulling Jesus by the ear because Jesus gives her guff about not wanting to do anything. And the reason why Jesus is so reluctant is because he says to his mother, "My time has not come yet. It's not time for this yet." And so there is this idea of Jesus, like Jesus is the Son of God the entire time. Jesus is it is the Messiah the entire time, but there is a time where he is going to come into his own. And that time is not in those years between 12 to 30. And if this is all about us knowing enough about Jesus to come to salvation in Jesus, there's clearly nothing that could enhance our choices or chances of salvation in those interim years. Like, do I wish that we had them? Yes, I do. Do I think that they would be fantastically interesting? Yes, I do. But, John's gospel is written so that people can believe in Jesus and believe that he's the Messiah. All the gospels are written in that same lens in different ways. And so what the conclusion and the piece that I've come to is that in those intervening years between 12 and 30, there's just nothing that advances the gospel part of Jesus' ministry and Jesus' life. He comes into his own at Cana, and then it's kind of off to the races from there.
Interesting. Just seems like we skip over 18 years that there's got to be some sort of nugget of importance.
Oh,
in that,
absolutely.
But apparently not.
Absolutely. I think it would be fascinating to, once we reach the pearly gates, on the other side of eternity, say, hey, Jesus, what was that all about? Like, did you have the rebellious stage where you can still be angry and angsty and not be sinful? Like, do you have that story in the back there? What's what were those years really like? What was it like losing Joseph? What was it like losing your dad so early? Like, I mean, supposedly losing your dad in those intervening years, like, what was that like? Like, how did that change how did that shape a part of who you are? Because that had to have had some kind of impact. Because, like, even though it's not his real dad, it's still his earthly father, and that's important. This whole point of this entire Advent story this entire Advent season has been about, Jesus taking on and experiencing the fullness of who we are as human beings. When we lose someone we love, and especially a parent, I mean, I'm not there yet, thank God, but that has to really weigh on a person in a way that changes them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And just, you're not, I mean, I'm 31, so I have nothing figured out yet. But I really don't think you have anything figured out in your 20s, I've decided.
No.
And so maybe that was part of it too.
That
he still had to grow into the role that he had to play.
Yeah. Yep. The way that Luke's gospel put it is that Jesus grew in stature and wisdom, and that's really all we need to know about those 18 years, is that he grew as a person, and he grew intellectually and spiritually and in his identity of who he is, and that's enough.
Yeah.
It gets us to the point of salvation. It gets us to the point of believing that Jesus was and is who he has said that he was and is, and that's the point of the Gospels. And anything outside of that is just kind of our human curiosity taking over, which is not a bad thing. Again, I think it's fascinating, but it's not really in the purview of the Gospels.
So you asked, or you said in the sermon, I can't remember which version it was, that this joy that Jesus provided, it was bigger than anything we've experienced, or bigger than anything in our lives, or deeper.
Right.
Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
so sometimes I think we get joy and happiness confused. Like, we want to be happy, and when we're happy, it's because things are going our way, or things are good, or like, I got a promotion at work, or my wife and I had this awesome date, or like, we have this good news of some kind. Like, happiness is a good thing, but yet I think that there's something bigger and deeper, and that's joy. Like, that is that overwhelming sense of, we know the story, we know where we're going, we know what we're doing because of Jesus. Like, and happiness is a thing that goes away. Like, happiness, like, we can have a good day, then we have a bad day, and it feels like we just threw the whole thing in the can. That's not joy, that's happiness, and those are two different things. And so I think that what I want us to hold on to is the bigger joy, because we're going to go through adverse times. And so how do we, what is it that we're supposed to hang on to in those adverse times? It's not our happiness, which is fleeting. It's our joy, which is established and founded in Jesus Christ and does not change.
So it's almost like a contentment.
Yeah. Yes. That's a great word for it.
In what our lives are having, or what God has given us in our lives, almost.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that was actually something that I cut. There was a couple of sentences there that I think probably could have been helpful, but like, there is a joy that is bigger than our circumstances. It's not a joy that says, hey, something good happened to me this day that didn't happen to me the other day. It's a joy that's bigger than the way that life can move and shift and work. It is that, like you said, it's that idea of being content in all, and then what Paul would add, being content in all circumstances.
Being able to look past the crappy parts of life.
Right. Yep. And still maintain, like, we're not going to be happy-go-lucky, smiling, high-fiving all the time, because there are situations where we want to, throat punch people. It's a part of our lives. But yet we still, even if we're not happy, we still have the joy of Jesus Christ in our lives. And that's what Jesus is establishing at his birth, and then what we experience for the rest of our lives. With that said, Eric, one of the things that I was wondering is, because joy is such a big topic and it's such a big area, and so looking specifically at the story of the shepherds, I would be interested to know, because this whole thing was about how the joy of the shepherds is the fact that they're included. Shepherds are not people that would normally be in such an important story. Shepherds are going to be always there, but not the key focus. But yet here they are in the story, and here they are playing a key role in the story. They are the ones that, on the night of the birth of Jesus, they're the ones that we know that are there. These are the humans. We talked about the great mystery of Jesus being born among the animals, but yet we know that there were human people there, and those human people were shepherds. And so the big joy that they find in Jesus' story is the fact that Jesus includes them in the story. There is such a joy in being included. And so one of the questions I want us to wonder at, Eric, is what has been an experience for you of finding joy in being included?
Finding joy in being included in my life of faith, or just in general?
Yes.
Yes.
Just in general is fine.
That helped.
Yeah. life of faith or in general is fine.
Well, one thing that jumps out is being entrusted with more responsibility in my life, whether that be at work or in the church. Either way, throughout the years of being an adult, which is not very long, and maybe sometimes my wife would tell me I'm not, but anyway,
Sorry, Jenna.
I have grown into different roles that I didn't see myself being in, or just having responsibilities that I thought maybe would take longer for me to get to. But I have been entrusted with these roles by people that I respect in the church and at work. And that has brought me just the idea that I have. Well, okay, let's back up. So I think everyone has this where they don't feel like they measure up to whatever standard you have in your head. You don't measure up to that standard.
Oh, yeah.
And so then being included as a project manager, as a shareholder in the company at DGR, or as a member of the leadership team, or the lay leader at our church. Sure. It gives me affirmation that, or it affirms the idea that I actually do measure up to maybe what I'm supposed to be. Yeah. Or what I have an idea in my head of what I'm supposed to be. I am apparently a halfway decent engineer, and a halfway decent follower of Jesus. But yeah, that brings me a lot of joy, knowing that other people trust me to do important things and want me to be in leadership roles in different ways. It helps me to be just content in that I'm doing the right things. Sure. I'm doing things that matter. Yeah. And then along the same line too, the work that I'm doing, whether at work or at the church or at home, whatever it is, there's a lot of joy, or I find there's just a sense of peace, a sense of joy, knowing that I'm making a positive impact. Oh yeah. In those things that I do, like the job that I do isn't for entertainment. It's not for, it's bringing, as our punchline would say, it's bringing quality water to rural America, right? There you go. And that means a lot, because there's a lot of rural areas that wouldn't have high quality water. So, stuff like that, it just making an impact, and being entrusted to do a lot of not necessarily easy things brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Eric.
yeah, how about for you?
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely like point to, I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but the night that I was commissioned as a provisional elder, a very now dear friend of mine named Pastor Dane Zackerson pulled me aside and said, well, we'll give anyone a shot, but welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
I was welcomed. I mean, it may have been a very roundabout way, and he hates that I tell that story because he was absolutely joking. But, the fact that he was able to joke around with me, like
Mm-hmm.
I was included. I was a part of it now. I mean, I was a
Mm-hmm.
licensed local pastor for a year. I was working towards commissioning. I was approved by the Board of Ordained Ministry after a very interesting site visit in Brookings, and then approved by the entire board. And then, I was shook by the bishop and commissioned as a provisional elder. And then, and that just kind of continued to grow. As a part of the provisional time, I have to go to these trainings every 6 months or so, these provisional residency trainings at our church camps, which were awesome because they got us to all of our church camps. And it was interesting to go from being the newbies at those. There's not a lot expected of you. You show up, you do the things, you stay out of the way of the big kids, the ones that are preparing for ordination. But then, like, you get a chance when you're in your second and then your third year of provisional residency, you get the chance to welcome those newbies into the program. You get to be their community, and we have, I mean, the group that I went through provisional time with, like, we have formed such a strong bond, and like watching how that has shaped me, and just knowing how much that means to me, and knowing how much that means to them, like that has been such a joyous thing for me. To know that I was welcomed well by a group of clergy that didn't know me and could have just said, we're getting ordained, so we're not going to really invest in this type of a relationship. No, I was welcomed well by a group of clergy, and then turned around and welcomed, I feel like we welcomed the new cohorts as well with open arms, and included them right away. And there was never this real like differentiation between, well, I'm in my last year of provisional residency and you're in your first, and so I'm going to just not, whatever, I'm not going to engage, or whatever. We just welcomed people well. And walking through ministry now with that cohort of people so well established has just been a really, really awesome thing. So, yep. Like, even just today, I was on Snapchat with a friend of mine, and that's a part of this group of clergy with me. And like, she's going through some stuff, and like, we were able to like reach out to one another and connect and pray for one another and just be present in the midst of this hard situation. It's because we formed that relationship throughout the entire time of our residency. So, yeah.
How about as a pastor, when you go to a new church? So you've been in Canton for how long?
I moved in 20, so this is the middle of my third year.
Okay.
Yep.
So at what point did you feel welcome here? Or what's that experience like? At what point do you feel like, okay, I'm doing the right thing, I'm getting that sense of being content here again? What's that like?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I mean, I feel, even at my introduction, because there were people that I knew already, like, because I have a very interesting backstory with the Canton Church of, my predecessor here at the church is a very dear friend of mine, and he has had me come down and preach a few times for him when I was still in seminary. And so, like, I didn't come into Canton completely blind. And so I saw some people that I knew, which was kind of handy. And then, I saw some people that I forgot I knew, namely a kid named Eric that used to sit in the back of our contemporary service at the Brookings Church. But, so I felt welcome immediately. And the fact that I was asked really good questions during my introduction, and like really entrusted with some information about the church that you wouldn't necessarily have given a pastor right away. I felt welcome then. But then I think the biggest thing is when parishioners feel okay joking around with you.
Sure.
Like that's huge for me. Like that signals a level of comfort where, not that I wasn't myself before that, but I know that you get me when we start to joke around together. Like when the first time that Howard Paul said, "Hey, let's go, I'll invite you over for a beer. We can watch the geese crap on my deck." I feel like I've made it at that point in time,
Yeah.
and then just, your dad and I now joke around all of the time, but yet in serious moments, we're serious with each other, but we have that range in our relationship where that's okay. I mean, the same thing with you and me, like there are all kinds of inside jokes that happen off mic recording this show and that get conveyed over text message or in other different ways, like being in on that kind of stuff. That's just such a huge relief. Yeah. Yep.
So I hate to break it to you, we're gonna have to let you go, but it's been fun.
Dang it.
Yep.
Don't worry.
You heard it first here.
Storage room. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's just got to work into your joy that Jesus provides when you're entrusted with such a big thing as you are.
Right.
You have to question if this is the right thing to do all the time.
Oh yeah.
The questions have just got to run rampant in your head like all the time, I'm sure.
Yes. Yep. Yes. The imposter syndrome is sometimes really real because I'm still young-ish at 35 as a pastor. Like, the number of times that people pointed out how young I am is in the fact that I'm their pastor. Like, that's not lost on me. The fact that this could have been a very different situation where they're not ready for a young pastor. And, maybe I would have been packing boxes after a year of, following more seasoned, pastors, not age-wise, but more, just in terms of tenure. It could have been a very different story. Just that's all there is to it. But yeah. I definitely feel like we've definitely found home here, and we definitely know we belong. It definitely has been, a place where I have felt affirmed in ministry, and hopefully, the church feels the same way. So,
what else did you cut, Clay?
Let's see. What else did I cut? One of the things that I cut was the idea that the shepherds did not necessarily understand all that was going on. The angels came and told them as much as they needed to know to get them to Bethlehem, but without very, very direct prompting, would the shepherds have gotten there? The angels left no doubt. Like the angels said, this is happening. The child is being there's a baby being born. He's Christ the Lord. He's the Son of God. He's your Messiah. Here's how you'll know that you arrived where you need to arrive, where you see a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger. Like, even if they knew the Messiah was coming, I'm just going to guess that this is not what they had in mind. You know what I mean? Like, they would have been looking for something fancier, a king, an adult of some kind, not a baby born to these very young parents and lying in, of all places, a manger. Like, there's no other way of putting that. That is a feeding trough for animals. That is not where you put a baby. That's not a thing that's supposed to happen. And so I wonder what was going through their heads, because that had to have been a very strange experience. And that's why they had to tell everybody about it, because you're never going to believe what just happened, Even if the shepherds didn't fully understand what was going on, they still went. And I think that's so cool, because so much of our own lives, we want to be sure of our next steps before we take them. And they take this huge risk by going to Bethlehem. And, thankfully, the angels gave them enough clues that they knew somewhere to start looking. But how many stables would there have been in Bethlehem? It's still a pretty good sized place, and there could have been a lot of confusion there. Again, had the angels not been as clear as they were. And they still probably didn't fully get it until years afterwards. But how cool is it that they trusted enough to make the journey in the first place?
It's all of Christianity, though, too.
Right?
There's so many pieces that we don't know, but we just jump in anyway because we we have that sense that it's right. And there's things in life that you just know is the right thing to do, even though you don't have all the pieces.
Right.
And after you've done it, you're like, man, that really was the right thing to do.
Right. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And again, that certainty, that certitude, that feeling of peace that comes with that feeling of contentedness is squarely found in the person of Jesus Christ. I mean, that's how it works. Jesus throughout his ministry showed us the way of how we're supposed to do things, and then made a promise to call those things to our mind by the power of the Holy Spirit. And that's just it's just such good news that starts here in the Christmas story and then just continues throughout his entire lives and then throughout our entire lives. That's why this story is so important.
So what's next week?
Yeah, so next week is another interesting week at the church. It is our One Way Up Christmas concert. So during worship, there will not be an actual sermon other than the band singing, which is awesome, and I love it. But I will be recording a sermon and posting it, much like I did this week, to Facebook, YouTube, and the audio to the podcast. And the focus is going to be on the fourth week of Advent. It's going to be love. And we're going to be talking about how we ourselves spread love and show love in the same way that Jesus did. We're going to be coming out of Luke's Gospel again, the story of the Magnificat, of Mary's prayer after Elizabeth greets her, after she finds out that she's pregnant and has had some time to come to terms with it. She gives this response that has been recorded in Luke's Gospel, that we now call the Magnificat. Basically, Mary lays out the way that Jesus is going to act and the things that Jesus is going to do as she understands it throughout his life. And Jesus does do all of those things, and it's all about lifting up the lowly and humbling the proud, and just bringing justice and doing these wonderful things that Jesus does accomplish. But it's bigger than that. And as we show the love of Jesus to other people, we do it how Jesus did it. And so we're going to be exploring what those things mean in Scripture, what those things meant as Jesus lived out his life, and then what those things mean for us as we live in the light of Jesus' love as well, as we use our hands and ourselves and our whole selves to show the love of Jesus to a world that needs to see it.
I like it. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us on this week's Cut for Time podcast. Join us again next week in church for the concert, or if you want to hear the sermon, join us online in our different places that we post those things, and then here for the podcast next week.
Thanks for listening to our Cut for Time conversation. Join us for worship in person or on Facebook Live Sundays at 10 o'clock Central Time. And now go in peace and serve the Lord.